A few years ago, when I first got into the barbecue game, I walked into my local butcher shop and said, "Hey, I'm really in the mood to do a brisket this weekend." Butcher looked at me and said, "Hey, do you want a left shoulder or a right shoulder brisket?" I said, "What's the difference?" He said, "I tell you," he said, "when cows are laying down and they stand up, they push on their right leg, so that muscle's a lot more firm and not as nice as the left shoulder brisket." I said, "Well, by God, I want one of those left shoulder briskets." And I left. A few months later, I come back and I asked for the left shoulder brisket, and the guy said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, you told me to buy a left shoulder brisket because the right shoulder brisket was tighter and all this kind of stuff." And he just laughed at me. He said, "Man, I was just pulling your leg." So that's not a true story. There's no difference between the left shoulder and the right shoulder brisket, but the difference is how you cook it. So on today's Smoke It, Grill It, Cook It, we're gonna break down the steps on how to cook the perfect brisket. So let's go. All right, everybody, we're back and we're going to trim up this brisket. This is a little bit of a process, so I'm gonna try and just walk my way through it so you can follow along with it. Now I've got just a brisket flat here. I don't have the point. Difference, flat has the grains running this way. The point would kind of sit up here. It's what you make the burn ends out of. I love the point, but I just got a flat for what we're doing today. So what, the brisket, there's two sides to it, right? Side A, side B. You'll notice side B is almost completely covered in fat. That's good. We like that. We're gonna focus on side A, and what I wanna do here, I've got my scrap bucket right here. There's some fat on this side I wanna take completely off. So all the fat, all the silver skin, all the weird pieces that are sticking out like this little thing. Now, I keep my scraps, I freeze them, especially if they have any meat on them. If they're all fat, I don't keep them. I probably should, but I don't. I keep the ones without without all fat, the ones that have a little bit of meat. Like this one's got some meat to it. I'll freeze that. I'll use it as part of my ground beef mixture in my my grinder. So I'm just going to take, you can see all this fat right here. I'm just going to take it very carefully. I don't want to dig into the meat, right? I don't want all of my meat going away. You can just see that's just a piece of fat. Ugh, we don't like that on side A. We want to be able to have all of the rub penetrate the meat without the fat keeping it from doing so. So what I'm doing here is just removing all the fat, removing all the silver skin. Now, I've got a long way to go on this. I'm not gonna sit here and bore you guys with me sitting here shaving off fat. Again, this is a little bit of a tedious process because you don't want to dig into the meat. Now, let me just give you a couple other notes. Now, on the fat side, a lot of people don't like to trim this down at all. They like the fat perfectly fine. It's just a preference. I like to go down like this piece is never going to render out. This piece is several inches thick. I'm going to take off fat on this side down to about 1/4 inch of fat. So again, it's not a fast process. And you know what? Hey, if you dig into the meat a little bit, okay, no big deal. So I'm going to work on that, work on the other side. And then if you've got anything, I don't know if you can see this, I'm not a big fan of this look on my meat. So I'm just going to square that up, take it off. And then we're going to have our brisket ready to inject. Yes, we're injecting today, and season. So I'll be right back. I'm going to finish trimming this up, and then I'll be right back, and we'll go over the whole seasoning process. So stay tuned. All right, we have finished trimming. I don't know if you can really see that, but I've taken all the fat off of the side A, right? A little bit of fat left in here. This is where the point connected to the flat. So it's going to be hard to really remove all of that, so I'm not worried about it. You can kind of see I left about 1/4 inch, maybe a little 1/2 inch right there. But I've trimmed this up to exactly the way I want it. Now, we are going to season this sucker up. Now, I went a long time before I ever agreed to injecting my brisket. I always said to myself, Aaron Franklin doesn't inject, so I'm not going to inject either. But you know what? I have found that I'm not Aaron Franklin. I don't have hundreds of people waiting in line for my barbecue every day. In fact, I don't have anybody waiting in line for my barbecue. I just like to cook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I inject this, and then I'm going to season it. We're going to wrap it up, put it in the fridge overnight, let it get all happy, and then we're going to throw it on a smoker in the morning. So on these flats, you've got grains just like anything else, so you can kind of see the grains run this way. I have prepared my flat where I trimmed this edge square. I've got a point down here. You can kind of see the point there on the top. That shows me which way the grain runs, so I can cut against the grain once I cook it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this sucker in a big long pan. I'm going to take my meat injector, and you want to kind of make a grid pattern. About every inch all the way down, you're going to inject that with something very special, but you want to inject against the grain. You want to inject with the grain. Cut against the grain, inject with the grain, if that makes sense. So we have a blend here that I can't tell you what it is, because if I told you, I'd have to kill you, because your barbecue would taste as good as mine and I wouldn't have this fun show. Okay, I'm kidding. This is simply beef broth and a packet of au jus sauce. So you can get like that little powdery packet that you would make au jus. I don't know how you say that. The cool tasting sauce that you dip your French dip in is what I have mixed in with my beef broth. I am just adding moisture to this. When you smoke something, if you don't add moisture in some way, shape, or form, whether it's spritzing, whether it's injecting, whether it's doing both, your meat's going to have a tendency to dry out. So you want to make sure that you keep your meat moist. Okay, now we are about halfway done. Whoa, I almost shot you. That's the fun part about doing this injection, because sometimes it injects or it sprays out the side of the meat. That's why I like to do this in a big long pan like this, because you are going to have those little pew, 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 pew things that go out. I do my little pew, pew, pew in honor of May 4th. May the 4th be with you. Get it? Star Wars, May the 4th be with you. I'm telling you, I don't know if I have a cooking career or a comedy career. Definitely not a comedy career. All right, so we're injecting. We're almost finished here. Again, grid pattern, about every inch, maybe every 2 inches. You don't have to, I'm not cooking this for, $10,000. I'm cooking this to eat on my backyard smoker. So I'm not worried that I'm not measuring every inch, or I'm not using a Wagyu beef brisket that I paid $1 million for, or anything like that. I got this at Sam's. They have them at Costco, very plentiful. This is a prime, USDA prime flat, so it's not a cheap cut of meat. It did cost me a little bit of money, but again, I've been in competitions where most of the teams that are really, really super, super good use a Wagyu that they pay 4, 5, 6, 7 times what I pay at Sam's Club or at Costco. They also, win thousands of dollars every weekend, and me and Tom and Matt go home wondering why the hell we didn't win money in brisket. All right, I have injected the whole thing. It's got a nice little, it's got a nice liquid on it. There's a little liquid in the bottom of the pan, but there's plenty of liquid in that meat. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to season it. Now, traditionally, people in Texas will tell you salt and pepper. That's it. 50-50 salt, 50% salt, 50% pepper. I like to do a little bit different just for a little bit more flavor. So I'm using this Pancho and Lefty's steak rub. It smells a lot like salt, pepper, and garlic, which I use a lot. GSP, if you don't have a mix, a blend of garlic, salt, and pepper, equal parts of each on your stove, I highly recommend keeping it just like you do salt and pepper. and Old Bay. Got that over there too. All right, so I'm using this Pancho and Lefty's steak rub. I am going to generously slather. No, this is not slathering. This is sprinkling. Generously sprinkling this on my brisket. Now, guess what? Season the sides as well. Don't forget about the sides. The sides are going, oh, please give me that nice Pancho Lefty steak rub bath. And you can't forget the sides, right? You want to keep every part of your brisket happy. Okay. Now, here's my trick here. I'm going to rub that a little bit. Kind of forms almost a little paste because of the liquid that we've got. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to do the same to this side. Again, you can use GSP, you can use salt and pepper, you can use anything you want. Aaron Franklin swears by salt and pepper, and so do most people in Texas. So you can use whatever you want. Like to rub it, make sure it gets all moist. I want to get that first layer moist because I'm adding a second layer. Now, this is the barbecue dust from Pancho and Lefty. Now, he's a world champion steak cook-off competition guy, so this is the bomb, right? So make sure you use something that has really good flavor, really designed for beef. Okay, so this goes on steak, beef, brisket, beef, boom. All right, so I am now coating this side as well. Nice and generously. I like this flavor of this Pancho and Lefty steak rub because you can already smell a little bit of cumin in this, all right? So he's got a lot of nice spices that you wouldn't just get out of salt and pepper. Now, I am not going to rub this, right? I am just going to kind of pat it. I don't want to form like that kind of paste on it. I'm just going to pat it, and I'm going to flip it. And I'm going to sprinkle. I'm about 14 inches above the meat. That gives you a nice coverage on the meat. If you get too close, you're not going to get a nice sprinkling of the dry rub on the meat. Already got the sides, yep. Pat. Man, oh man, I cannot wait. Take this glove off. I'm going to kind of tip that sucker up and show you. Oh yeah, nice and coated, nice deep mahogany color. I am now going to wrap this in foil. I'm going to put it in the fridge. I'm going to forget about it until tomorrow morning. All right, so our brisket's been in the refrigerator overnight. It is looking so good. I don't know, yeah, you can see that. Man, the dry rub that I put on it, it's ready to go. It's ready to get on the smoker, so let's do that. So what I like to do, there's a big debate, fat up, fat down. I go fat up. I'm a firm believer in the fat renders down into the meat. Some people will tell you it doesn't matter. I'm a fat up guy. So fat up on the smoker. I've got my smoker at 225. I'm going to check it about every 30 to 45 minutes and spritz with my apple juice water combination. My little secret is when I put it on fat side up, I take another little sprinkling of my Pancho and Lefty steak rub, the thing that kind of smells like garlic, salt, and pepper, and I just lightly sprinkle it on the top of the meat on the fat side, and then I let it do its thing. Put my probes in so I can always monitor the temperature. 225. I'll be back with you throughout the cook to check it out. I'm ready to get this thing on, so let's go. All right, let's take a look here. Internal temps running about 150. Let's take a look. Let's pop open the badass Rectech here and take a look. Oh yeah, it's looking really nice. We're gonna spritz a little bit. Keep it kind of moist. We want that to darken up even more. Not quite black, but almost black. Looking fantastic. Let's close this sucker. we'll be back when it's ready to wrap. Oh, hey there. Just taking a little siesta because the brisket is in what's called the stall. Perfectly normal. The stall means your temperature rises, and then all of a sudden it kind of plateaus. And in competition, you're like, okay, time to get out of the stall. Let's go. And then it shoots back up. So right now we're in the stall. So I'm just going to kick back, relax, and I'll be back with you when we're ready to wrap. Hasta luego, or hasta la vista, or see you later. All right, so we've made it through the stall. Had a good nap waiting on it. This thing looks really good. It's nice and dark. There's actually some juices oozing out over the side. What I've done is put a little layer of beef broth down on my foil. I've got some little pats of butter. I took half a stick of butter and just put little pats down there. I'm gonna spritz it one more time. Moisture is good at this point, right? We don't want this sucker to dry out. It's not gonna dry out because it's gonna be wrapped in foil. A lot of people use like a butcher paper. I stick with the foil. I've used the butcher paper. I can't tell the difference. You can use whatever you want. But I'm gonna double wrap this and wrap it nice and tight. That way. And come over this way. Nice and tight. I'm gonna put this sucker back on the Rectech, put my probe back in, and then we're gonna test it once it reaches about 202, 203. Now I pulled this to wrap at 167. You want to be above that stall, which is usually once it gets above 165 or so. So I pulled this at 167. Gonna check it again in about an hour and then pull it off at about 202, 203 in that range. And I'll be back with you when that happens. All right, so we're 9 hours in on this beautiful brisket flat that we're working with. I had to put it in one of my half trays just a minute ago as I was taking it off because I overzealously poked a hole in the bottom of the foil. Perfectly okay, I just didn't want to lose all that lovely juice. Now, I hit 203 with this, but I wanted to make sure that there's another test, right? Temperature's always the best thing, but when you first put a probe in your brisket, it's gonna be a little bit hard to fit in the meat, right? It's gonna feel resistance. When it's done, it should slide in almost like you're poking this probe into a stick of butter, right? Now, this probe I'm using is a Thermopin instant read thermometer. If you don't have one of these, get one. Thermopin is what I recommend. There's a dozen or so out there on the market. I've got this Thermopin. It's a traditional Thermopin instant read thermometer. Definitely every kitchen needs to have one. Now, here's the most important part of your brisket. We want to let this rest. Usually I let a steak rest about 10 or 15 minutes. This is going to rest for 2 hours. Now, here's why. When meat cooks, right? I told you it does this, right? When you rest a steak, it does this. We want the brisket to do this, right? It's here. We want it to just, we want, So, we're gonna wrap it in a towel. I know some people use blankets. Some people don't use anything. I've always used a towel. We're gonna put it in a cooler. We don't want it to sit out here and cool. We want it to go in the cooler. So it's doing this even slower. And the juices are just collecting even that much more. So I'm gonna get this in the cooler. We're gonna close it. 2 hours. I want you to wait 2 hours while it's in the cooler. Then it's gonna be ready to slice. Can't wait. All right, boys and girls, what do you say we take a look at this brisket and slice it up for dinner? All right, we're gonna take it out of the cooler. Now see, the cooler acts as an insulator. It's still very, very warm. So let's get this out of the way. All right, now take it off here. I'm gonna take the foil off in my half pan because I know that I jabbed the bottom of it, so I don't want all the juices to leak out, because we're gonna maybe drizzle some of those juices over. Look at this puppy. Oh, look at that. Doesn't that look good? Love that. Now, if you remember, I cut this into a point, so I know I'm gonna slice this way. So, still a lot of juice in the bottom of that. We're gonna save that because we're gonna put some of that sliced brisket in there. Let me get my towel here to kind of wipe my hands off. Now, let's take a big old section right here. Oh, just look at that. Look at that smoke ring. The juices are flowing out of that. Oh, that looks just absolutely perfect. You want to slice this about 1/4 of an inch, or for those of you who don't know how much 1/4 of an inch is, you can use like a number 2 pencil. It's about that width. So you want to slice this relatively thin. You're going to get a piece like that. We're going to pull it a little bit. You want it to have a little bit of pull. Man, that's good brisket. So, gotta be patient with the brisket, but it is well worth it. So, next time you want to go cook a brisket, follow these easy steps. 1, 2, 3. God, look at that smoke ring. I love it. It's easy. 1, 2, 3, people. All right. See you next time on Smoke It, Grill It, and Cook It.